Hello and welcome to the Wedding Dish Podcast. Grab your fork and knife and take a seat at our table as we dish on all things weddings. You'll hear stories and tips from real couples and wedding pros about love, life, and entrepreneurship. I am Sarah Alapin, the host of The Wedding Dish and CEO of Photos from the Hardy and District Bliss. Before we get started, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, you have to go back and check it out. It's such a good one. It's packed with such great info about style for both guests and for couples. So great episode. Flag it for later if you haven't checked it out yet. Thank you so much for tuning into the Wedding Dish. Today, we are dishing with a leading provider of luxury portable restroom trailers specializing in high-end sanitation solutions for events of all sizes. Love that. The human behind Royal Restrooms, David Sauers, thank you so much for joining me on the Wedding Dish today.
My pleasure. I am super excited to be here. It's going to be a great podcast.
I am so excited. I think this is such an important topic, and I think it's something that there is a lot of I don't know, not as much thought is put into this as you should put into it prior to. I feel like once you get to a certain point in the wedding planning, it's like oh shoot, I should have thought about this, or, there's so many options. But let's dig into it. Why is the bathroom always such a hush hush topic?
It we have been doing this for 22 years, and it has always been kind of hush hush. It's like shh, don't we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to necessarily discuss it. And I think that goes back to just our upbringing. You're taught that, it's a private moment. It's your time.
Yeah.
And it's something that you don't, it's like, hey, I just went to the bathroom. You don't really talk about it. So I think that transforms into the events and what our business is, but it's such a necessity. I mean, it is still a very private moment within each of ourselves. And we've all had a terrible experience, which has created some type of anxiety around going to the bathroom. So we're here to provide a real functioning restroom, a pleasant experience at your event.
I love that. I think that's such an important point that we have, there is, you can think of right now, everyone out there, I'm certain you have just listed in your head bad experiences that you've had, whether it's like the toilet won't flush or it's, just sticky floors or wet floors and you're in a dress and or like nice shoes and those experiences, like it's just when it's a bad experience, it's such a bad experience and it's something you then are going to talk about. And on the flip side, when it's a good experience, it's something that you actually do remember that it was a good experience. Especially when you have an expectation that it may not be a good experience, and it turns out to be a very good experience. Um, so I'm curious, how do we pivot from that traditional quote unquote porta potty experience to a royal restrooms experience? I know it's so different. Like I can think of exactly all of the reasons, but I'm so curious, like, what are your thoughts on how it's different?
Well, there's a lot of differences, but as you just mentioned, when you're at a wedding or any type of event, or the when you have to go to the bathroom, it's always that question. You know, do you ask somebody about it? Do all of a sudden this, you go to a, not such a pleasant place in your mind about going to the bathroom because it's not yours. It's not you haven't approved it yet.
Yeah.
And that's where we come in. Royal Restrooms, it was created out of an experience that was, just not acceptable. So by providing a real functioning restroom, elevating it with, it's climate controlled, there's a vanity, there's a sink, there's a real flushing toilet. You have the ability to move around in there,
Hmm.
maybe even if you need somebody to come with you, it's you have that space. So even in a dress, you have that flexibility, but then you can take a second before you exit the bathroom. You know, you can, it's almost like a breath of fresh air. You know, it's kind of hard to say when, you know, we're talking about bathrooms, but it's, you can breathe in it. You walk out, and then when you come back to the table, you're like, did you see the bathroom? And you're
Yeah.
talking about it for the next 10 minutes, and you're telling other people about it. And all of a sudden it changes your, the rest of the evening. You know, you're no longer gauging your activities around a bathroom, how much you can drink, how much you're going to eat, you know, how long of a line are you going to have to wait in. You can enjoy the rest of your evening for what the real event is intended for.
Yeah, that's so true. And having, worked weddings where there have been royal restrooms versus a traditional, quote unquote, traditional porta potty, which I'm sure all of us can bring up in our mind, specifically the smell is what immediately hits me when I think of a traditional porta potty. But I have to admit, the I've been to some like July weddings and August weddings in the DC area. And it can be really hot and muggy here. Much like, I know you're based in Savannah, so I am not going to get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sympathy from you, but it is hot and muggy. You've got a whole different class of hot and muggy, but we still get it. I remember at one specific wedding, the royal restroom was the only place that had air conditioning at this wedding. And going in there, it really was like a breath of fresh air because it was like I was covered in sweat. I was so sticky. And because everyone was so sweaty and it was outdoors and it was really humid, it was also incredibly buggy. So the only place that you could go to get away from the bugs, because because it was air conditioned and climate controlled, you didn't have the bugs in there. So it was just such a nice break from, and like it was a beautiful wedding. We had a great time. Everyone had so much fun. You all actually provided bug spray. I don't know if you
Ah,
normally do that, but you did. It must have been something you offered. But I noticed because I was like, oh my God, thank goodness there is bug spray in this bathroom.
yes, we do that. It's not something that we, you know, we offer it. We have them on the little hand sprays, and we have
Mhm.
sunscreen as well, so we can pass them out at the venues and events. You know, which is much like. Hopefully, you got to taste one of our buttermints. They are
Yes.
specifically done for us. So we are very proud of our buttermints, which are in every one of our restaurants.
I love that. Yeah, it is such an experience. It's so different because you go into, if you're going to a backyard wedding or you're going to like a barn wedding, there is that thought of like, what is the bathroom experience going to be here? And like, oh God, is this going to be like a disaster? And honestly, as a female, like a woman who wears dresses typically to weddings, unless I'm working them and that happens too. But if I'm wearing like a long dress, I am definitely going to take into consideration what I expect the restroom situation to be. And I think, there is so much power in having a good experience. And it really is something that like makes the guest experience so much better and yours. Like if I was in a wedding dress and I had to go into a traditional porta potty that doesn't flush and that smells like the cleaning stuff, I don't even know what it's called, but everyone knows the smell.
Mm-hmm.
I would not like that in my dress.
Right. And you know that's the thing. So many people, it's not something that they think about when they're planning the wedding. They're thinking the tents, the cake, the dress. You know, we're oftentimes kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
You know, because you're focused on the food and the tasting and all that stuff. A bathroom's kind of a bathroom is what you think of it, but it's really not. You know,
Yeah, it's not.
everybody is going to utilize the bathroom. They're not going to all eat the shrimp cocktail. They're not going to all take a look at the ice sculpture and really appreciate it, but they're all going to use the restroom. And
Yeah.
you want that experience to be as seamless as possible.
That's very true. I also think, well, I would love to hear a little bit about what you all, in terms of like the actual aesthetics. We talked a little bit about the inside that has, you've got a sink in each stall, you've got a vanity in each stall. It is climate controlled, the toilet flushes. It looks like a real bathroom inside, in my experience. It's like, it looks like it's wood floors and stuff, it's like nice
Yes.
space. And this is how you know I actually have used your restroom.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. A good review is always what we're looking for.
It's important.
Memorable as well.
Yes, true. That's true too, because I'm pulling back from a couple years ago now. But let's talk a little bit about in terms of like the actual like appearance of the exterior, because there's a difference here too. So can you tell us a little bit about what a Royal Restrooms looks like from the exterior and what the options are surrounding that?
Yeah, sure. So the bulk of our fleet is, I mean, it's a trailer. And there's usually a white exterior or a gray exterior is typically how most of our trailers are nationwide. But throughout the years, we have heard from so many wedding planners across the US that it's, from a wedding standpoint, event standpoint, it's beautiful on the inside, but it's just not really photogenic. You know, it,
Hmm.
it so we want to move the trailer a little further away from everything, which does create a problem for your guest and the social flow of the event.
Yeah.
So what we did a couple years ago is we created the vintage restroom trailer, which is a polished stainless steel that is mirrored on the outside. It's rounded on all the corners, and it reflects the surroundings. So it almost blends into the background. So any kind of trees that you've got or shrubbery, it, it's almost like it disappears inside the landscape.
Hmm.
And the other thing that we did was we increased the interior size. So it's very large, but also when you walk in, it is an eye shocker because it is all bronzed gold inside the walls, the ceiling. You have the LED lights, you have a large countertop, sink. The vanity has different lighting modes so that you can look at yourself in different lighting modes to see what is the best effect. And like you said, the hardwood grained floors in there, but it's all for that experience to bring it closer, and it's what all of the event planners, the wedding planners have asked for something different. And we're still rolling those trailers out to a lot of different offices. We still don't have a huge number of them, but we're getting them out there to the offices as quickly as we can.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, the proximity of the restroom to your actual event, for so many reasons. But to name a few, first of all, if you have to go to the restroom, you don't want to be away from your wedding celebration for a significant amount of time. You also don't want to, you don't want to end up having a situation where like your person who's doing a toast has to go to the restroom and then they're gone and now you're running late. And or you're doing the post photos and half of the people had to run to the restroom. So now they're halfway across this giant field and you're running late because of that. So the proximity, and also, if you have anyone who has a mobility, disability related to mobility, or heels can sink into the grass too, that all goes into proximity of the restroom to your actual event. So having these vintage trailers, or I mean, I hate that I just called them trailers because that's not how I would classify them. I know that they are trailers, but that isn't what they look like. They look like a cute little Airstream. I've also seen these.
Uh, Thank you. See, they're nice.
They are. They're
But
really cute.
but just to touch on what you're saying, the bathroom, where the placement of the bathroom is important to that, like I said, that flow. But people congregate around the restroom.
Hmm.
It is almost another gathering area. So you don't want to split that up so much. A lot of times we recommend placing some high top tables out there so that people can set their drinks, because people kind of come and go in flows. They go in little groups and they congregate outside of that. But to even go a step further, like when you were saying heels and mobility and your elderly, what about your disabled? We have handicap
Hmm.
accessible, ADA accessible trailers that can allow you that access, that can, you know, if you're worried about that because of grandmother, and you've always wanted to have a wedding out at the farm or this lake or something that was a memorable moment in time, you can use a handicap accessible trailer to do that, instead of having to go to the golf course or the hotel or another venue that may not be your first choice. We
Yeah.
offer those solutions.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. That's so important. So what does the overall process look like in terms of logistics for, you know, what placement, like what exactly do we need to think about before booking a Royal Restrooms? What are we going to need and what do the logistics look like?
Well, for all Royal Restrooms offices, we like to think of ourselves more in the professional event services industry, not just the sanitation service side of it. So weddings are, excuse me, very important to us. There's almost like this emotional attachment to it, because we're gonna be a part of your special day.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when people call and start requesting this, there's a few things that we ask. We ask, how many people are you having? Are you serving alcohol? We want to make sure that we get the right head count, so that we
Hmm.
provide the right amount of stalls, so that there's a good flow. And typically the rule of thumb is 1 to 100. Weddings, we like to do a 1 to 50 ratio per stall. And that makes a good even flow throughout the event. Next, we're going to ask about power and water. We need to make sure that we have at least a 20 amp dedicated outlet, so that we can run so that it can be climate controlled and run the entire operation of the trailer. Next is the water source. We typically like to be somewhat close to a water source, but if not, all of our trailers have onboard water systems, so we can use that system. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're on somewhat level ground. And in more extreme cases, if we need to, we'll come out and do a site visit. We'll talk with the event planner. We will be a part of that. We'll offer our advice. We'll offer suggestions, because we don't want to be too far apart. We don't, you know, we want to be a smooth, seamless, enjoyable evening. We love to be mentioned, but we want to be mentioned the right way. And we want to be
Yes.
thought of in the right way.
I love that. I think that's so important. And I love that you addressed event size here because, weddings, like people are drinking more, so they are going to need to use the restroom more often. And if you have, if you only have one restroom, there is go definitely going to be a line. So having a place like talking to you, David, like how many, what would be our ratio, our guest to ratio, bathroom ratio at a wedding?
Well, depending upon the hours and how long you're going, but it does account for that. Sometimes it accounts for the age of
Mhm.
is it a young crowd? Is it an older crowd? Um,
Great point.
but you, yeah, I mean, it's a celebration, and especially, people like to have fun at weddings. I mean,
Yeah.
you can count on, people having a good time, and which ultimately ends up going to the bathroom more. But
Yeah.
a 1 to 50 ratio. So that's one stall to every 50 people. That's a good rule of thumb with a moderate to heavy drinking crowd. Otherwise, you can go 1 to 75. but at the most that we want to do is 1 to 100. If you've got 200 people, the minimum amount of stalls that we would recommend would be two. But of course, we would like to see more than that. So
Got it.
it's usually it just comes down to their preference. You know, we advise and we go from there.
Yeah. I mean, that's great information because if you are at a wedding venue that's an outdoor venue, if they only have one bathroom for the entire property, like one stall, like you may want to actually consider bringing in a Royal Restrooms in that situation, even though there is a restroom on site, which is kind of why I was thinking about that, would like, I'm sure there are situations where you've had to do that.
All the time. And I mean that opens up the venue to more people so that it can accommodate more people. A lot of times you just read something online and it's like, oh, this wedding venue is up to 200 people. Well, if we provide a bathroom, we can probably get more people there. That may be the
Yeah.
limiting factor.
Yeah,
Or
that's
there
true.
are or there are event venues that have a lot of property and they have one main wedding facility. Well, having a nice portable bathroom, do the tent weddings. I mean, have you seen the tents are they're fairy tale.
Oh yeah.
They are beautiful. I mean, it's some of them have gotten so elaborate and so fancy that you don't feel like you're in this world anymore with the skylights and the twinkle lights and the chandeliers, and they can really make things just a field absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And, you know, we love to be right there beside it.
Yeah, I
That
love that.
that's it's the all the different weddings that we've seen and been a part of has been truly magical. To you see these weddings on TVs. I've been to them. I've seen them. I wouldn't necessarily guess, but I've seen those. I've been at those weddings, and let me tell you, it is something just you just don't forget. It is
Yeah.
burned into your mind forever.
Yeah, and it gives you those possibilities. Like, I've had this just like reminds me of all the places or all the times that I have worked with Royal Restrooms. And we had a backyard wedding in the Northern Neck in Kinsale, Virginia. And there, at the time, there were like no venues on the Central Peninsula. It was like very few. Even staying down there, it was really difficult to get places for people to stay because it's very remote. It still is very remote. Now there are some more, like there are a couple wineries that have opened up and things like that. But if you want to be on the actual water, you're very limited
Mhm.
there. And that allowed for, the house that they have, the river house, which is this is super common in this area. Sorry, this is like so niche, but in that area, it's typically like a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom house because the house isn't the point. The river is the point. So it's,
Yes.
being able to go out on the water and be on your boat or be like, you know, in the water and all the things. So it's those, in order to have that happen, you have to bring in, you can't have a backyard wedding with just one stall, which is inside someone's house. Like imagine having 200 guests go into your house and use the one dedicated bathroom inside the house. Like that's just a tough
And
experience.
and it's probably on a septic system, so it's a very
Yeah, it is.
small septic system,
Hmm.
like us. So you don't want that to happen. There's a
Yeah,
$3,000 or $4,000 bill, and it's bubbling up in your yard, probably in your
yeah,
event space now. So
yeah.
yes,
And this
our
is a real
bathrooms.
thing.
Oh, try yes. We are very aware of that. We are very aware of
I
that.
have seen this. And it is one of the most unpleasant experiences that you can have.
Hmm. It very much so. So I
Uh,
you it we have them very rarely now, but a long time ago, it used to happen a whole lot more because people, didn't know that we existed, or
yeah,
they didn't want to necessarily, they were trying to save a dollar here.
yeah,
And when you think about it, we are not an expensive service. We are a very when you think of the benefits of it, we are priced very good across from a wedding industry standpoint. So I'm it's check us out.
yeah. I would tend to agree, and I also feel like this is not a place where I would want to skimp, because again, when it's bad, it's very bad. So, and I love the idea that it does open up where you can say, if you want to have a backyard wedding, then you can have a backyard wedding, and it doesn't rely on the systems you have in your home, which are not professional systems. Like, regardless of if it's septic,
Mhm.
it's still not a professional quality system. It is a home system, it is residential. So I think that's a really important point, too. David, thank you so much for joining me on the Wedding Dish podcast today. Where can our listeners find you online?
Absolutely. So you can find us at royalrestrooms.com, and we are nationwide. We're in about 18 states, and we want to do your wedding. We want to do your next event. So you can find us there on any of the social platforms. It's under Royal Restrooms. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me under David Sauers on LinkedIn. But please do. Please come follow us. We cannot wait for this episode to come out with you on the wedding dish. So we are going to blast it across. Um, but thank you. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Of course. Thank you for joining me. I think that this is such an important topic and something that's just so often not thought of until you're so far down the road. So, having like couples knowing that there is an option and what those options are before they've even chosen their venue, like there's so much power in just knowing that you have the ability to choose and that you don't have to compromise. So I really appreciate you coming on and joining me on the Wedding Dish today. And we will, of course, link out to you in our show notes at theweddingdishpodcast.com. And you'll get tons of other information about Royal Restrooms there as well. We have a fun little questionnaire that David completed for us, and we will tag Royal Restrooms on Instagram. You can find us at the Wedding Dish Podcast. And go ahead and give us a follow, rate, and review. And it makes us more discoverable. We would love to hear from you. We love hearing from our listeners. And don't forget to tune in next week. We have another amazing guest I am so excited about. And until next time, cheers, everybody.